Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. I work in a small solar system research group at NASA, and today looks completely normal. That is the part I cannot understand. My colleagues are standing beside the coffee machine, complaining about how difficult it has become to secure telescope time. My boss is making a fresh pot for the office, behaving as though providing caffeine to his employees is the most important contribution he will make to science this week. Our group's internal message channel is still discussing a large cardboard box someone found yesterday. Good boxes are surprisingly difficult to locate around here, so 3 different departments are currently negotiating over who gets to keep it. I am sitting at my desk checking emails and reviewing last month's expenses. Apparently, I spent $20 on lunch during a conference. I am now wondering whether accounting will consider that excessive. This would be an ordinary morning, if not for the fact that something artificial is moving through the solar system toward Earth. Everyone should be panicking. The press should be outside demanding answers. Government officials should be filling the building. The military should have taken control of our data days ago. Honestly, I would welcome that. I would happily surrender my computer to a group of armed people who understood that the situation was serious. Instead, I am checking receipts while my colleagues discuss a cardboard box. Everything began about a month ago. The first large batches of observational data from the Vera Rubin Observatory were coming in, and my team was testing a new machine learning system against some of it. The system was designed to identify objects that might otherwise be overlooked. Small asteroids, distant moving bodies, and unusual changes in brightness can become buried inside enormous amounts of information. We expected the algorithm to find a few interesting targets. It did. At first, the discovery seemed minor. The program identified an object moving among the Trojan asteroids near Jupiter. Based on its apparent size and orbit, it was probably another small asteroid. There are countless objects in that region. Most are dark, irregular pieces of rock that have followed Jupiter around the sun for billions of years. This one was different. It was much brighter than the surrounding asteroids. Not a little brighter. It reflected enough sunlight to stand out clearly from everything near it. Our first assumption was that the object was made from an unusually reflective material. Some asteroids contain bright minerals or exposed ice, and different surface conditions can produce unexpected observations. Nothing about that required aliens. I wish I could tell you that we gathered around the screen, looked into one another's eyes, whispered that we had discovered extraterrestrial technology, and immediately contacted the White House. That is not what happened. We are scientists. Most of us are too old, tired, and buried in administrative work to respond dramatically to anything. We agreed the object deserved more attention, requested additional observations, and went to lunch. A couple of weeks later, we finally received better data from a larger telescope. That was when the atmosphere changed. My team gathered around a monitor and examined the object's changing brightness. No one said the word aliens. Not yet. But we were all thinking it. I certainly was. I also began wondering what I would do with the money from my future Nobel Prize, which says something embarrassing about my priorities. The object was incredibly reflective. It shone more brightly than any natural body of that estimated size should have. More importantly, the light changed in a repeating pattern. Asteroids rotate, so their brightness often rises and falls as different surfaces face the sun. An irregular rock produces an irregular pattern. This object's pattern was precise, too precise. The glints repeated at regular intervals, suggesting flat surfaces or a highly ordered shape. We could not see the object directly. It was too far away for that. We could not determine whether it was a vehicle, station, probe, or something completely different. But it did not behave like an ordinary asteroid. Professionals cannot announce the discovery of alien technology because something looks unusually shiny. We needed independent confirmation. I sent Bill, one of my team members, to obtain time on an infrared telescope. That would help us estimate the object's size and temperature. I asked the others to contact observatories that might have existing data from the same part of the sky. Our boss stopped by after hearing about the discovery. He congratulated us and looked pleased, probably because he imagined the funding opportunities attached to an unusual object. To his credit, he offered to contact the people responsible for the James Webb Space Telescope and ask whether they could observe it. I did not expect that request to succeed. Just observing time is planned far in advance. Scientists wait months or years for access. They do not normally interrupt the schedule because one middle-aged researcher thinks he found a shiny asteroid. By the time the meeting ended, we had attracted an audience. Most were administrative employees from nearby offices who had noticed the group around our monitor. Their jobs at NASA involve scheduling, supplies, meetings, and paperwork, which is not much more exciting here than it is anywhere else. I noticed Joanne among them. She was a radio astronomer we had worked with before. She was about 20 years younger than me, intelligent, careful, and much better with radio data than anyone on my team. I called her over and showed her what we had found. She studied the information for several minutes. She had never seen an asteroid behave quite like it. Then she smiled. Want me to point a dish at it and see whether it's transmitting? She said it as a joke. We both understood how unlikely that was. Even if the object were artificial, it might not use radio communication. It might be dead, inactive, or millions of years old. Still, there was no harm in checking. Go ahead, I said. Then if someone asks whether it's broadcasting "We Come in Peace," we can tell them no. I spent the rest of that day dealing with the paperwork created by our discovery. Requests had to be submitted. Observations needed to be logged. Management wanted a preliminary statement prepared in case the object became publicly interesting. I went home that evening trying to find the correct balance between scientific humility and ensuring that my name appeared prominently in any future announcement. At that stage, it was only an unusual discovery. Best case, it could transform my career. Worst case, it might earn me a good performance review and perhaps a small raise. I still did not believe it would change the world. The next morning, I arrived at 6. Joanne was already waiting beside my desk. She held a thick stack of printed plots against her chest. She looked terrified. Fear is not common in our work. People become concerned when a crewed mission experiences technical problems. They become tense when equipment worth billions of dollars behaves unexpectedly. But even then, scientists normally respond by becoming focused. Joanne looked as though she had spent the night deciding whether to build a shelter beneath her house. The object is transmitting? I asked. She did not answer. She spread the plots across my desk. I had not worked directly with radio telescopes for years, but the signal was obvious. Natural radio sources usually produce broad, noisy patterns. This signal was narrowband. It occupied a precise section of the spectrum. It was also being modulated rapidly. Information appeared to be encoded in it. It has to be interference, I said. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. Maybe a communication satellite passed through the observation. Or someone nearby is operating illegal equipment. Joanne shook her head. It has been transmitting continuously for hours. The signal follows that exact position in the sky. Has another observatory confirmed it? Not yet. I have a video meeting with 2 in an hour. Good, until someone else confirms it. Local interference is still the best explanation. She knew that already. She still looked frightened. I offered to join the meeting. Part of me wanted to support her. A larger part wanted to be present for every development involving the object my team had found. An hour later, Joanne and I sat in a small conference room facing 2 screens. Professors from separate observatories appeared. I expected excitement. At minimum, I expected intense curiosity. The signal on Joanne's plots could have represented the first confirmed artificial transmission from beyond Earth. Instead, both astronomers looked annoyed. Not frightened. Not amazed. Annoyed, it was the expression someone might give a waiter who brought the wrong meal twice. Joanne began explaining the observations. The older astronomer interrupted her. He was a white-haired man in his 60s with an excellent reputation. There is nothing mysterious about the source, he said. The only mystery is why you marked the verification request as urgent. The signal is not artificial, and it is not coming from inside the solar system. The second astronomer nodded. We interrupted time-sensitive work to observe it, he said. I'm disappointed you did not perform basic analysis before contacting us. Joanne stared at them. It is a narrowband, modulated signal, she said. Terrestrial interference can produce that. A natural astronomical source cannot. The second man shrugged. It is probably an unusual pulsar. A pulsar. I almost laughed. The signal looked nothing like one. The older astronomer agreed. He said it might make a decent paper, but did not justify an urgent request. Then he announced that he had real work to complete. Unless you have another message from extraterrestrials to share, good day. Joanne asked them to send their observation data. The older astronomer agreed, closed the connection, and disappeared from the screen. The second offered a kinder farewell. He spoke to us in the careful tone someone might use with a confused elderly person claiming to be a famous singer. Then he disconnected too. Joanne and I sat in silence. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt lost. Their explanation was absurd. Even if the signal had been an unusual pulsar, that would still have been an important discovery. No serious radio astronomer would glance at something that's strange and dismiss it within minutes. The speed at which they ended the meeting was also inappropriate. We worked for NASA. Even scientists who disliked us would normally pretend to respect the institution long enough to discuss the evidence. What just happened? I asked. I don't know. Joanne looked down at the plot. The signal remained as clearly artificial as before. Do you think someone told them to dismiss it? I considered that. A secret government agency was not impossible. If officials had already identified the object, they might want to prevent the information from spreading. But the professors had not behaved like people following instructions. If someone ordered them to conceal the discovery, they could have delayed us with a convincing technical argument. Instead, they had made the mystery more obvious. They believed what they were saying, I told her. That is the problem. Joanne nodded slowly. They had not looked nervous or dishonest. They genuinely believed the signal was natural. We returned to my office. I expected my team to be working intensely on the object. Instead, everyone was seated at their usual workstations, performing the same routine analysis they had been doing before the discovery. My first question was why anyone would abandon the most important find of their careers. My second was who had taken them off the assignments I gave them. The answer to the second arrived when my boss approached carrying a coffee and a thick file. "Bad news," he said. He almost looked sympathetic. "It is a normal asteroid. The infrared results are conclusive." He placed the file on my desk and pointed toward the unread messages flashing across my monitor. I couldn't get Jwest to observe it, but that is probably for the best. "Did you examine the data?" "No. I trust your judgment. Spend the next day writing the conclusion, and then return to the machine learning project." He walked away. I opened the file. Every summary reached the same conclusion. The object was normal, not worthy of further consideration. That exact phrase appeared repeatedly. The actual data said the opposite. The object's estimated size and reflected light confirmed that its surface was extraordinarily bright. Then I examined the thermal observations. Asteroids absorb sunlight and release part of that energy as heat. There are physical limits to how much thermal radiation an object of a given size and distance should produce. This thing exceeded those limits by an absurd amount. It was releasing energy comparable to multiple nuclear reactors operating in space. That was the moment I fully accepted the alien possibility. Not a strange rock, not an unusual mineral, an artificial object carrying an enormous power source near Jupiter. It was the greatest discovery in human history. Every country on Earth needed to know. Yet every report called it unimportant. Then I noticed an attachment marked GIST. My boss had just told me that GIST had not observed the object. The attachment contained a complete report. Someone had diverted the most advanced space telescope in operation on impossibly short notice. The data clearly showed the same unnatural object. The conclusion read, "Not worthy of further consideration." "What is happening?" I said aloud. Joanne was seated at a nearby terminal. "I have data from another radio dish." She displayed the trace. The same narrow-band modulated signal appeared. "Good," I said. "Now look at this." I opened the GS report. The remaining color drained from her face. My heart began beating in a pattern that probably would have interested a cardiologist. "We need to tell someone," Joanne said. "I don't know why the entire field is denying what it sees, but we need to take this higher." My boss was talking with several graduate students across the office. He was intelligent. More importantly, he had connections. People might ignore Joanne and me, but they would listen to him. I swallowed my pride and asked for his help. In 8 years of working under him, I had never done that before. He came to my desk and examined the evidence. At first, he looked skeptical. Then, his expression changed. By the time he reached the Dwest data, his skepticism had become anger. "They told me they did not observe it." He closed the file sharply. "This is unprecedented. Fabricated conclusions, false labels, people lying to a department head. We need to contact someone senior." He knew the deputy director. Not well, but well enough to receive a meeting. He asked Joanne to join him because he needed someone who could explain the radio signal. He told me to remain in the office. "If anything unusual happens, make a note. Don't cause panic. We still don't know what this is." Joanne connected the live signal trace to my workstation before leaving. 15 minutes and several heated calls later, they were gone. I sat alone at my desk, watching the signal pulse steadily in one corner of the screen. Part of me still hoped the entire problem came from an administrative misunderstanding. Maybe I would be praised for exposing it. Maybe everyone would apologize. Then another email arrived from the Second Radio Observatory. The message included its raw results. The signal was present again. Artificial, strong, modulated, the researcher had added written comments throughout the plot. The first note said, clearly artificial, very strong, need to identify the source. A later note said, probably not terrestrial, strangest signal I have ever seen. 2 pages after that, the tone changed. Perhaps I was too quick to call it artificial. The signal seems less defined now. I checked the trace. It had not changed. The same precise modulation continued. A few pages later, the final annotation appeared. Mistake to think this was anything other than natural. Possibly an unusual pulsar, not worthy of further consideration. The signal remained identical from beginning to end. I finally understood that no one was being threatened into silence. Their perception was changing. They looked at impossible data and gradually became unable to recognize it. The process was visible in the notes. First came surprise, then doubt, then complete acceptance of an explanation that contradicted the evidence. I stood and examined the office. Everyone behaved normally. No strange visitors watched from the hallway. No government agents stood near the exits. My colleagues were not chanting or pledging loyalty to an alien intelligence. Rogers was wearing clothes that did not look as though they had survived since the 1970s, but even under the circumstances, I could not blame that on mind control. I returned to the monitor. The signal was stronger. I checked the earlier data. Its intensity had been increasing steadily for 10 minutes. Whatever was transmitting had raised its output dramatically. For the next hour, I alternated between watching my colleagues for behavioral changes and monitoring the signal. I wanted to stand on my desk and demand that everyone look. I resisted. My boss would return soon. He and Joanne would contact senior leadership. Then someone would act. When they finally entered through the far door, I felt relief. My boss was stopped by Rogers before reaching me, but Joanne continued to my desk. How did it go? I whispered. She ignored me and began collecting her notes. Joanne? She looked at me with anger and embarrassment. It is Dr. Moreau to you. I stared. What happened? I cannot believe you talked me into this. Talked you into what? Did the deputy director examine the signal? I entered his office and showed him a pulsar trace. I have never been so humiliated. Even he recognized it immediately. I cannot believe you convinced me to question myself. My stomach dropped. That is not a pulsar. You know it isn't. People nearby turned to watch us. Joanne's expression hardened. It is not worthy of further consideration. Whatever it is. She gathered the last pages. And I told you, it is Dr. Moreau. We are not friends. She walked away. I remained beside the desk, unable to move. A hand touched my shoulder. My boss stood behind me. We need to speak privately. I followed him into his office. He looked disappointed, as though I had embarrassed myself at a conference or destroyed expensive equipment. You upset a lot of people today, he said. More importantly, you let yourself down. I listened. Your insistence on claiming extraterrestrial contact dragged in the deputy director, me, and Dr. Moreau. You saw how distressed she was. He suggested I had pressured her because I was older and more experienced. The accusation was ridiculous. Hours earlier, he had stood beside us and called the evidence unprecedented. Now he remembered the meeting differently. He said he had apologized to the deputy director and taken responsibility for my behavior. He warned me that Joanne's career could have suffered. I expect you to drop this matter entirely. Is that clear? I nodded. I did not know what else to do. He told me to return to the Rubin data. Before dismissing me, he reminded me that my expense report was late. I walked back through the office while people whispered. The most important event in human history was happening, and I found myself worrying about my career. That was how powerful normality remained. Even when confronted with impossible danger, part of me still cared whether my colleagues thought I was unstable. The live signal continued flashing on my screen. I moved the cursor toward the button that would close it. Then I noticed another change. The signal's frequency was shifting in a precise way. At first, I did not want to accept what the data showed. I compared it with earlier measurements. I checked the object's position and movement. Then I began writing calculations on paper. Some values had to be estimated. Others were guesses. But the conclusion was clear. The object was no longer remaining among Jupiter's Trojans. It was moving toward us. Fast, faster than any human-built spacecraft. I recalculated the time several times. The answer remained roughly the same. 2 days. That was how long it would take to reach Earth. 2 days to warn the world. 2 days to hide. 2 days until whatever had already changed the minds of astronomers arrived physically. The warning option seemed hopeless. If I tried contacting the press or government directly, someone would probably have me arrested or committed. Even if they examined the data, the signal might affect them too. They would begin interested, become doubtful, and eventually decide I had shown them a normal asteroid. Running was equally pointless. Where would I go? A cabin in the mountains? An underground shelter? I am not built for wilderness survival. I struggle when the air conditioning fails and the refrigerator is not fully stocked. No location on Earth would be far enough away from something capable of crossing the solar system in 2 days. For a moment, I considered leaving work early and finding a bar. I could drink until the object arrived and face the end without understanding it. That felt like abandoning my post. So I stayed. I continued monitoring the signal. I decided that if an opportunity appeared to help, I would take it. More likely, the signal would eventually change me too. Perhaps that would be a mercy. Joanne no longer looked frightened. My boss was making coffee. The others had returned to ordinary work. They were calm because they could no longer recognize what was approaching. I was the only person in the office still afraid. I do not know why I have remained unaffected. Maybe I have not. Perhaps writing this is part of the same influence. Maybe the object wants one person to understand, so the fear has somewhere to exist. The signal is still increasing. Every few minutes, I look around the office and wonder whether I should shout. I could stand on my desk and announce that aliens are coming. I could smash the coffee pot, pull the fire alarm, or force everyone to look at the calculations. But that is not who I am. I am a mild-mannered middle manager who worries about expenses and telescope schedules. So I am sitting at my workstation while my colleagues behave as though everything is normal. I have completed the form for my $20 lunch. I have answered 3 emails. The cardboard box negotiations are becoming surprisingly hostile. Outside this office, billions of people are continuing with their lives. They are going to work, arguing with family members, ordering food, planning weekends, and worrying about problems that may no longer matter. They do not know something is coming. And if I showed them the evidence, they might look directly at it and decide it was not worthy of further consideration. If you are reading this, perhaps you are still capable of understanding. Maybe distance from the signal protects you. Maybe written words can cross whatever barrier has formed around everyone here. I do not expect you to stop the object. I have spent my life studying the solar system, and I have no idea how to stop it. I only want someone else to know that we saw it. We detected the object. We measured its shape, heat, movement, and transmission. Scientists across several observatories recognized the truth. Then, one by one, they forgot how to see it. Now it is coming here. It will reach Earth in approximately 2 days. I hope you find a meaningful way to spend them. Something more meaningful than sitting inside an office, checking expense reports, and pretending that everything is perfectly normal. My name is Nikolai. I am 56 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life working as an archaeologist. I am also a man who has lived long enough to watch nearly every belief I once had fall apart. There is a deep scar running across my jaw. It is old now, pale and rough against the rest of my skin. But I still notice it whenever I look in a mirror. Some scars become part of your face after enough years. You stop seeing the injury and start seeing the person who survived it. I still exercise every morning. It is less about staying healthy and more about refusing to surrender completely to age. I stretch until my joints loosen, lift weights, run when the weather allows it, and force my body through routines that would probably be easier to abandon. But lately, there has been no hiding what is happening. My knees hurt more than they used to. My back stiffens after long drives. The dry air gets into my lungs more easily, and every morning seems to remind me that there are fewer years ahead than there are behind. I was born in the Soviet Union. When the Union collapsed, I remained there long enough to see what came afterward. People sometimes talk about the fall of a country as if it were a political event. Flags change, governments disappear, borders move, new currencies are printed. That is not how I remember it. I remember people becoming desperate. I remember families who had once lived ordinary lives suddenly standing in lines for food. I remember old men selling possessions on the street because their pensions had become worthless. I remember alcohol swallowing people who had no reason left to wake up sober. And I remember the girls. Foreign businessmen and criminals came looking for vulnerable young women. They advertised modeling jobs, beauty competitions, work abroad, and promises of better lives. Many of those promises were traps. Young women who had grown up believing they might have normal futures suddenly found themselves being sent away to places where nobody knew their names and nobody cared what happened to them. Watching all of that destroyed something inside me. Before those years, I had been deeply religious. I was an Orthodox Christian, and my faith had once felt as solid to me as stone. Then everything around me collapsed. I watched innocent people suffer while cruel men became rich. I watched good families disappear. I watched desperate people pray and receive silence. Eventually, I decided God had abandoned us. So, I abandoned him. I left Russia and traveled south, eventually settling in Turkey. Archaeology became the perfect escape. The dead are easier to understand than the living. They do not lie to you. They do not make promises. They do not betray you. They simply leave things behind. Broken pottery, walls, bones, tools, fragments of lives that ended hundreds or thousands of years before your own troubles began. By 2002, I had become a Turkish citizen and secured a position at a university. Over the years, I worked at excavations across the region and built a respectable career. Now I work with a younger generation of archaeologists. My current team consisted of 4 Turkish researchers: Kaan, Emre, Zeynep, and Elif. They were intelligent, hardworking, endlessly curious, and possessed exactly the kind of optimism I had lost decades earlier. Sometimes I found their enthusiasm exhausting. Most of the time, I secretly envied it. Our latest project began on a bus in Iraq. We had spent several weeks in Nasiriyah before starting the journey north. Our time there had been surprisingly pleasant. The people had been welcoming, the food excellent, and our professional arrangements had gone more smoothly than I expected. But the farther north we traveled, the emptier the landscape became. The bus rattled across long roads surrounded by dry earth and pale sky. Towns became smaller. Traffic became rarer. My younger colleagues sat several rows ahead of me, laughing over survey maps and arguing about measurements. None of them seemed bothered by the isolation. I was. Our destination was a newly discovered group of ancient ruins somewhere north of Nasiriyah. The discovery had already caused excitement throughout the archaeological community because the preliminary dating made absolutely no historical sense. The ruins appeared to be Christian. That alone was not unusual. The age was. Initial testing suggested the site dated back to the early 1st century. If those dates were accurate, then someone had built a major Christian religious structure deep inside Mesopotamia only a short time after the death of Christ. That should not have been possible. Christianity was still a tiny religious movement centered around Jerusalem during that period. According to everything we knew, it should not have reached that far east so early. Certainly not in a form organized enough to construct an enormous complex. If the findings were confirmed, history books would have to change. For a man who had abandoned Christianity decades ago, I found it darkly amusing that I had been invited to help uncover what might be one of its earliest forgotten sites. The bus finally stopped outside a small town near Batha. We would spend the night there. The moment I stepped down from the bus, I sensed something different. Nasiriyah had been full of noise and movement. This town seemed almost hollow. Dust hung in the air. Small mud brick and concrete homes crowded narrow streets. A handful of locals watched while we unloaded our cases and surveying equipment from beneath the bus. They did not greet us. They did not smile. They simply watched. Emery and Khan were arguing about who should carry the heaviest equipment case. Zeynep and Elif were taking photographs of the sunset turning the buildings orange. None of them noticed the expressions on the faces around us. I did. The locals were whispering, and there was something in their eyes that bothered me. We found rooms inside a small, concrete guest house. The place was ugly and uncomfortable, but I had slept in worse places during my life. After what I had experienced in Moscow 30 years earlier, a hard mattress and dusty room hardly qualified as suffering. The Iraqi Archaeological Society had arranged vehicles to collect us the following morning. Those vehicles would take us farther north to our main camp, located near an abandoned village close to the excavation. That evening, Khan and I went walking through the town. The sun was sinking, covering everything in a deep orange glow. As we passed through the narrow streets, I began to understand the strange looks. The locals were not angry with us. They were not suspicious. They were afraid for us, or perhaps afraid of what we were going toward. They are looking at us strangely, Nikolai, Khan said quietly. Do you think they do not want us here? I glanced at a woman standing beside a doorway. She looked away the moment our eyes met. No, I told him. Look more carefully. Khan frowned. That is not anger. What is it? Pity, he looked at me. I nodded toward another group of locals watching us from across the street. They look at us the way a priest looks at a dying man. Khan stopped smiling. Before he could answer, someone called to us. An elderly local man was sitting near a small fire at the edge of the town square. Several large fish had been opened and placed near the flames. The smell reached us immediately. Smoke, spices, and roasting fish. The man's face had been carved by years beneath the desert sun. Deep wrinkles covered his skin, making it difficult to guess his age. Welcome. He called in broken English. He waved towards several woven rugs around the fire. "You are scholars, yes?" Sit, eat, Khan's concern disappeared immediately. "Thank you, Uncle," he said. He practically dropped onto the rug. "Is this Maskoof?" The old man nodded. "Yes, Maskoof, you eat well tonight." Then he looked directly at me. The cheerful expression on his face faded slightly. His eyes carried the same sadness I had noticed throughout the town. "Tomorrow," he said, "you go north. Old stones, abandoned place. That is the plan," I replied. "We are here to study the ruins." The old man slowly shook his head. He looked back toward the fire. "Some stones should stay buried, Russian man." Khan glanced at me. "The earth eat them for good," the man continued. "Better this way." Then he suddenly smiled again. "But we do not speak of dark things in night. Eat, drink tea. You are guests." I thanked him. Khan stayed beside the fire and began helping the old man prepare the meal. I told him I needed to move around because my knees were hurting after the bus ride. While I stretched my legs, I noticed something between two old houses farther down the street. A church. I stopped walking. It was not ancient. Judging from the plain concrete design, I guessed it had been built sometime around the 1950s or later. Still, finding a modern Christian church in such an isolated Iraqi town was unexpected. I laughed quietly. Khan looked up. "What?" "Irony." I pointed toward the building. "We travel thousands of kilometers to excavate ancient Christian ruins. And there is a church beside our guest house." Khan laughed. I should have returned to the fire. Instead, I found myself staring at the cross above the building. I had not entered a church for spiritual reasons in decades. Religion belonged to another version of me, a younger man, a man who still believed suffering had meaning. Yet something about that church pulled at me. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Maybe it was the contrast between the darkness inside and the warmth of the fire behind me. Whatever the reason, I walked toward it. The wooden doors were unlocked. I pushed one open. It groaned loudly. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud. The sounds from the street immediately became distant. The church smelled of dust, old wood, and melted candle wax. A few weak light bulbs hung overhead, barely bright enough to push back the darkness. There were only a handful of wooden benches. At first, I thought the church was empty. Then, I noticed two men standing near the front. The first man was tall and Caucasian, probably somewhere in his early 30s. He was extremely fit, not simply athletic. There was something almost unnatural about how perfectly straight he stood. His clothing was even stranger. He wore a heavy trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a bowler hat, in the middle of the Iraqi desert. I had known men who carried themselves like that during my younger years in the Soviet Union. Intelligence officers, military men, people trained to notice everything without appearing interested in anything. My first thought was that he might be some kind of spy, but something about him did not fit even that explanation. The second man was ancient. I do not use that word lightly. He looked older than any person I could remember meeting. His body was thin and fragile. His skin hung in deep folds around his face and neck. For a moment, I joked to myself that perhaps he had personally watched the ancient ruins we were going to excavate being built. He leaned heavily on a bright yellow walking stick. The color stood out strangely inside the gray church. Both men looked toward me. My body tightened automatically. Old survival habits. The elderly man smiled. He had almost no teeth, but there was nothing threatening in his expression. It was warm, kind. The younger man raised one hand and tipped his bowler hat. The movement bothered me. It was too stiff, almost mechanical. His arms seemed to move in separate sections rather than with the smooth motion of a normal human body. Yet strangely, I did not feel afraid. Everything about the pair should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, the church felt peaceful. The old man spoke. "Welcome, friend. Please come sit." His English was flawless. Educated, clear, his accent sounded Iraqi, but far more polished than I expected from someone who looked as though he had lived his entire life in a forgotten desert town. The younger man silently pointed toward one of the benches. I walked closer and sat across the aisle from them. Something changed when I approached the elderly man. The church seemed warmer. The shadows did not look as heavy. Even the pain in my knees eased slightly. I shifted my legs. Surprised, the constant ache had become little more than a dull pressure. "Are you Christians?" I asked. I looked around the empty church. Perhaps the last Christians in this town? The old man laughed. It was a surprisingly strong laugh for someone who looked so fragile. "No," he said. He leaned against the yellow stick. "I believe in something older." He smiled. "Much older. I considered the history of Mesopotamia." "Jewish?" The old man gave a small, almost playful nod. He did not exactly confirm it. He simply smiled. I turned toward the younger man. "And you?" He slowly shook his head. Again, the motion looked stiff. "I do not subscribe to such things," he said. "I am merely an observer of the region." That was when I finally understood what bothered me about his face. His lips barely moved. He was speaking perfectly clear English. Every word sounded normal, but his mouth was hardly opening. His jaw remained almost completely still. I stared at him. Human speech does not work that way. The tongue, lips, cheeks, and jaw all moved together. His did not. The words simply came out. My instincts should have told me to leave. I had survived enough dangerous situations to know that when something feels wrong, you do not wait for an explanation. But I still did not feel threatened. The younger man was unnatural. The old man appeared impossibly old, yet sitting beside them felt strangely safe. So I stayed. I introduced myself. "Nikolai." They both nodded. The younger man asked what had brought an academic from Turkey into such an isolated part of Iraq. I told them about the excavation. Their reaction surprised me. They understood archaeology, not casually. Professionally, the younger man asked detailed questions about our ground-penetrating radar results and our planned stratigraphy methods. The old man spoke about ancient building techniques and even discussed the expected composition of mortar from the period. I stopped answering at one point. I simply looked from one to the other. These were not ordinary travelers. Their knowledge was too specific. The old man noticed my hesitation. His eyes shone with amusement. "Uruk is nearby," he said. "You are not interested in visiting?" For the first time that evening, I smiled properly. Uruk, one of humanity's oldest great cities. Of course I was interested. I had worked at Atahik in Turkey and had spent years among some of the oldest known settlements in the world. But Uruk was different. Uruk was legendary. The conversation slowly moved away from archaeology. The younger man tilted his head. "Were you born in the Union?" I nodded. I gave him the short version of my history. The collapse. Leaving Russia. Turkey. University life. Archaeology, I avoided the darker details. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he remained silent for several seconds. Then he said something unexpected. "I was there in Afghanistan." I frowned. He looked far too young. "As a child?" I asked. "During the invasion?" He lifted one gloved hand. The gesture was strangely wide and formal, something like that. He lowered it. "But I do not blame you, nor your country. Afghanistan suffered much worse afterward. Then he leaned slightly forward. I could not see his eyes behind the sunglasses. Still, I felt as though he were looking directly through me. Do you mourn your country, Nikolai? I did not answer immediately. I thought about Moscow, the cold, the breadlines, the violence, the people who disappeared, the faith I lost. I thought about the country that had created me, then collapsed while I was still young enough to believe nations were permanent things. Yes, I said. I waited. I expected sympathy. Perhaps he had lost a homeland, too. Perhaps he would tell me about Afghanistan. Instead, he did nothing. No reaction. No emotion. No follow-up question. He simply became completely still. It was as if someone had switched him off. I shifted on the bench. The silence became uncomfortable. Then the old man burst into laughter. Do not mind him, Nikolai, he said. He waved one thin hand toward his companion. That is simply how the young man is. The strange tension disappeared. The old man's eyes sparkled again. When you visit Uruk, he said, remember me. I smiled. What should I remember? Old Sham from this small town. I will remember Sham, then I looked toward the younger man. And you, what is your name? His expression did not change. His jaw barely opened. Al-Murakib. Before I could ask what the name meant, someone knocked loudly on the main doors. Nikolai. Khan, are you in there? There was concern in his voice. I turned toward the entrance. For a ridiculous second, I imagined looking back and finding the two strangers gone. Some old desert ghost story. I turned around. They were still there. Sham smiled. Both men motioned toward the entrance, telling me silently to answer Khan. Then they stood. The younger man supported Sham by one arm as the old man leaned on his yellow walking stick. Together, they moved toward a small side door beside the altar. Nothing dramatic happened. No shadows, no disappearing figures. Just two strange men leaving a church. I am coming, Khan. I walked to the main doors and pulled them open. Khan stood outside. He looked past me into the dark church. What are you doing sitting in here by yourself? I am not by myself. He frowned. I was talking to two men. I turned and pointed. The space near the front was empty. For 1 second, my stomach tightened. Then I saw the side door. It was open. Dry wind moved through it. I laughed at myself. They left through there. Khan shrugged. If you say so. Come on. Food is ready. We returned to the square. By then, the small fire had become a large gathering. Emery, Zeynep, and Alif were seated on thick rugs with our host's family and several other villagers. Large carp roasted beside the flames. Baskets overflowed with flatbread. Smaller birds cooked over another set of coals, covered with spices and shining with fat. Eat, our host called. He placed a fish on the large communal plate. Welcome to our home. The meal was wonderful. Nobody cared about the language barrier. Emery attempted to explain how badly the bus had shaken on the road from Nasiriyah by bouncing around and throwing his arms into the air. The local children laughed so hard that one of them nearly fell backward. Ef handed out pieces of Turkish delight she had brought from home. In exchange, the family kept filling our small glasses with dark tea flavored with cardamom. For a while, I forgot about the ruins. I forgot about the church. I forgot about the strange looks we had received. Then I noticed our host's wife watching Zeynep. She was handing her a piece of roasted bird. Her smile disappeared for only a second. But I saw it. Pity, deep sadness. The same expression people had given us when we entered the town. It was the look you give someone when you know something terrible is waiting for them and there is nothing you can do. I looked down at my food. The warmth inside me suddenly felt weaker. To distract myself, I thought about the two men from the church. Surely the villagers knew Sham. A man that old would be famous in a town this small. But the younger man interested me more. "Uncle," I called to our host. He looked toward me. "Do you know a man called al-Murakib?" He frowned. A tall man, dark glasses, western coat. "Al-Murakib?" He repeated it several times. Then he shook his head. "No, that is not name. He told me that was his name." The man spoke rapidly to his grandson. The teenager pulled out a phone and opened a translation app. After typing for several seconds, he showed me the screen. "The Observer." I stared at it. Then I laughed. "What?" Elif asked. "Nothing. Apparently our mysterious friend told me his name was The Observer." Emre laughed. "Maybe he really is a spy." The villagers did not understand him, but they recognized the joke in his voice and laughed with us. I stopped worrying about it. Perhaps the younger man was simply eccentric. Some people enjoy creating mystery around themselves. The evening continued. Someone brought out a traditional drum. Soon, several villagers were dancing around the fire. Emery and Khan joined them immediately and completely failed to follow the steps. Everyone laughed. Zeynep and Elif were eventually pulled into the dancing as well. I remained seated. My knees were feeling strangely good, and I had no intention of ruining that miracle by attempting to dance. As the drum beat echoed through the square, I thought again about Sham. The old man had radiated something I could not explain. Warmth, energy, peace, even remembering him, made the dark church seem close. I leaned toward our host. "Uncle," he turned. "The other man." "What man?" "The old one who was with al-Murakib. Very old, yellow walking stick." I smiled. He told me his name was Sham. Our host stopped moving. "Sham?" "Yes." His face changed. Not fear, something stronger. Amazement. He leaned forward. "Old Sham spoke to you?" I frowned. "Yes, he spoke words." "Of course." We talked for quite some time. The man's eyes widened. "That is impossible." I stopped smiling. "What do you mean?" "Old Sham has sickness of mind. He forget everything." He tapped the side of his head. "Many years. Many, many years." Then he pointed toward his ears. "He cannot hear." He touched his mouth and cannot speak. I felt something cold move through my stomach. The laughter around us suddenly sounded distant. "That is not possible," I said. The host shook his head. "He is deaf, completely mute. Long time." I remembered Sham laughing. I remembered his perfect English. I remembered his detailed knowledge of archaeology. He spoke to me. Our host stared. "He told me to remember him when I visited Uruk." The old man looked upward. For several moments, he seemed unable to find words. Then he looked back at me. "Then who was other man?" I said nothing. "Who was observer?" he whispered, to make silent Sham speak. I had no answer. The host moved closer. "Sham has lived here since before I was born. My father knew him when he was boy. Even then, Sham already old man." I looked at him. "How old?" He shook his head. "Nobody know." He pointed into the darkness beyond the square. "They say he carry rifle in First Great War. Fight British, the First World War. That would make Sham impossibly old." "Maybe older," the host continued. "Nobody know. We feed him. We care for him. He belongs to town." I looked toward the alley leading back to the church. The music continued. People danced. Children laughed. The fire burned brightly. Yet the desert suddenly felt ancient in a way I had never experienced before. Not historically ancient, alive with age, as though the land itself remembered things humanity had forgotten. I went to bed later, expecting another uncomfortable night. Instead, I slept almost immediately. It was one of the deepest sleeps I had experienced in decades. There were dreams. I cannot remember them clearly, only that they were peaceful. When I woke the next morning, I felt strangely restored. Even my knees barely hurt. The vehicles from the Iraqi Archaeological Society arrived soon afterward. We loaded our equipment into several large SUVs. A crowd gathered to say goodbye. I searched carefully through their faces. No sham, no al-Maraqib. Do you see them? Khan asked. No, Emery groaned from behind us. I cannot believe we missed the chance to meet the oldest living man in Iraq. You had your chance, I told him. You preferred the fish. I made the correct decision. Elif laughed. If the stories are true, Sham fought the British before our grandparents were born. I would have liked a photograph. The vehicles left the town. We drove north into the desert. After a while, Zeynep removed several briefing papers from her bag. She spread satellite images across her knees. Do you understand how large this site actually is? She asked Khan. He looked at the images. It is an early church. No, she tapped the paper. It is an entire underground complex. The radar suggests structures covering an area comparable to ancient Babylon. Khan stopped smiling. That large? More than 300 archaeologists are coming from multiple countries. Emre leaned forward, and Arthur Pendleton is leading the excavation. Zeynep smiled. At that moment, she still admired him. He is one of the greatest archaeologists alive. I looked out the window. My jaw tightened. I hated Arthur Pendleton. Not because of his success, not because of his money, not because of professional competition. I hated him because I knew what kind of man he was. Years earlier, an independent journalist had published an investigation into Pendleton's private behavior during the collapse of the Soviet Union. While people in Moscow were starving and desperate, Pendleton had traveled there under the respectable cover of academic cooperation. According to the investigation, he had used his money and Western connections to take advantage of vulnerable Eastern European girls desperate to leave the country. Some were barely more than children. He promised opportunities. Then used them. The evidence should have destroyed him. It did not. Universities ignored it. Institutions protected him. His reputation remained almost untouched. I had never forgotten. Now I was traveling into the desert to work beneath the command of a man who represented everything I hated about those years. He is a pathetic swine who preyed on the young girls of my motherland, I said. The vehicle became silent. Svolok. The Russian word left my mouth before I thought about it. I almost never spoke Russian anymore. I had spent more than 30 years in Turkey. The language belonged to a part of my life I preferred to keep buried. My colleagues understood what it meant that I had used it. Zeynep and Elif exchanged looks. Their earlier excitement about Pendleton disappeared. Khan reached across from the passenger seat and rested a hand on my leg. You are right, Nikolai, I looked at him. He may have the money. He may have the grants and the reputation. Khan's expression was serious. But you are a better man. We are proud to work with you. Zeynep nodded. So did Elif. I did not know what to say. I simply nodded once and looked out the window. We drove in silence for almost another hour. Then the abandoned village came into view. Beyond it was the excavation site. I had expected tents, equipment, maybe several temporary laboratories. What I saw looked more like a military occupation. Huge climate-controlled dome structures covered the desert. Diesel generators formed long rows. Satellite dishes stood above the camp. Transport trucks were parked with almost ridiculous precision. Wooden walkways had even been constructed across the sand so researchers would not have to walk directly on the ground. The amount of money involved was obscene. Khan stared through the window. Where did the Iraqi Archaeological Society find enough funding for this? They did not, Zeynep said. The admiration in her voice from earlier was gone. Pendleton paid for most of it. She looked at the camp. Pendleton and Emirati money. Our SUV stopped. The moment I stepped outside, the heat pressed against me. Khan and Emre stood beside the vehicle, staring at the enormous compound. Doctor? Nikolai? I turned. Two people approached along one of the wooden paths. Both were British. They wore clean, khaki field clothing that looked as if it had never touched dirt. The older man offered his hand. Dr. Thomas Harris, Oxford, he smiled. And this is my colleague, Dr. Eleanor Vance. Eleanor greeted me. We have been assigned to help your team settle in. Thomas was still smiling. I must say, it is an honor. Your work at Attlehike changed the way our department understands Neolithic communities. I shook his hand. His grip was surprisingly soft. Eleanor offered similar praise. I introduced Khan, Emre, Zeynep, and Elif. I had never enjoyed academic compliments, especially from people I had just met. Eleanor seemed to notice our team staring around the camp. Impressive, isn't it? Expensive, I said. She smiled awkwardly. Pendleton spares no expense. That was exactly the problem. We followed them deeper into the compound. The generators created a constant mechanical hum. The place did not feel like an archaeological excavation. It felt like someone had purchased a piece of the desert. Thomas stopped beside a safety railing. Below us was an enormous rectangular pit. Sector 1, he said. We looked down. This appears to be the main nave of the structure. We have removed nearly 40 feet of sand and debris. 40 feet? Khan asked. Thomas nodded. And we have not reached the foundation. I stepped closer to the railing. Then I saw the walls. Dark stone blocks, massive, perfectly fitted. No obvious mortar joints. My stomach tightened. The construction looked wrong. Too heavy. Too old in style. It reminded me of Cyclopean masonry found in ancient pagan sites, not early Christian architecture. Zeynep leaned beside me. Where are the Christian markings? We have found them, Eleanor replied. Crosses, early Christian symbols, several carved into the upper sections. But she hesitated. But the Christian symbols are mixed with Mithraic imagery. I turned toward her. Mithraic, bull-slaying scenes, other pagan elements. They appear throughout parts of the complex. Khan adjusted his glasses. A mixed religious site. That is what we currently believe, Thomas said. Then his expression changed. The excitement disappeared. There is something else. I waited. We received the latest isotopic analysis yesterday. He looked down into the excavation. Taking the masonry, organic residue inside the stone, and other factors into consideration, our current estimate places construction around 10 years after the death of Christ. Nobody spoke. I looked down into the pit again. 10 years. It was impossible. Christianity had barely spread beyond its earliest communities at that point. Yet beneath us stood the remains of an enormous religious complex deep inside Mesopotamia. Not only Christian and Mithraic, built with construction methods that appeared far older than either. Everything about it contradicted the accepted history. We continued along the walkway. The generators grew louder. Several large tents nearby were guarded, not by local police, private security. Armed men stood near the entrances with rifles. Pendleton had hired mercenaries to guard an archaeological excavation. That bothered me almost as much as the ruins. Your quarters are ahead, Thomas said. He pointed toward a large white dome. Pendleton has called a mandatory briefing for all new arrivals at sundown. I stared at the structure. Everything was clean, organized, expensive, controlled. But the longer I stood there, the more wrong the place felt. I had lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union. I had seen violence, desperation, hunger. I had watched an entire society tear itself apart. And yet, standing in that bright Iraqi desert, surrounded by hundreds of researchers, armed guards, expensive equipment, and ruins that should not have existed, I felt a kind of fear I could not compare to any of it. My hands were trembling. I tried to tell myself it was the heat. I knew it was not. For the first time since we had begun the journey, I genuinely hoped my instincts were wrong. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. Truth be told, I have never been much of a hunting guy. Call me a coward if you want. I have heard worse. I just never felt comfortable around guns. I know how to hold one. I know the basic safety rules. I can aim well enough when something is standing still in front of me. But actually hunting, tracking an animal through the woods, waiting for the right moment, pulling the trigger, and watching something living fall to the ground, that was never really my thing. So when my friend Alex called me one Friday afternoon and asked if I wanted to go on a hunting trip, my first instinct was to refuse. Alex was the complete opposite of me. He loved anything that gave him an adrenaline rush. Hunting, climbing, dirt bikes, abandoned buildings, swimming in places with warning signs. If there was even a small chance that something could go wrong, Alex somehow found that exciting. We had been friends for years, but lately we had barely seen each other. Work had taken over most of my life. Everyone had their own schedules, relationships, problems, and responsibilities. Months could pass without any of us meeting up properly. Alex hated that. "We need to get the boys back together," he told me over the phone. I laughed. "For hunting? For a weekend? Come on. We haven't done anything together in forever." I tried to think of an excuse. The weather, work, family, anything. The problem was that I did not really have one. Alex also had this strange talent for convincing people to do things they did not want to do. Maybe it was his confidence. Maybe it was the way he smiled when he wanted something, with those bright blue eyes that somehow made him look like a lost dog instead of the reckless idiot he actually was. Whatever it was, it worked. By Friday evening, I had agreed. There were 4 of us going. Me, Alex, and 2 other friends who I will call Rory and Jamie. Rory was the easiest person in the world to get along with. He was quiet, polite, and a little awkward. He was also terrible with alcohol. 2 beers could turn him from shy and reserved into someone laughing at absolutely everything. Jamie was different. Even back then, Jamie made me uncomfortable. Not because he was dangerous. At least, I never thought he was. He was just strange. When we were younger, Jamie was the kid who collected dead insects and spiders in glass jars. He would bring them to school and proudly show everyone like they were trophies. He also had this old branding iron that belonged to his father. I never understood why he carried it around. Sometimes it was in his backpack. Sometimes in the trunk of his car. Sometimes he would bring it on camping trips and heat it in the fire for no reason other than watching the metal glow red. We used to joke that one day he would accidentally brand himself. Looking back now, I owe my life to that stupid iron. We packed everything that night. Food, water, beer, sleeping bags, a small tent, extra clothes, hunting gear, rifles, a first aid kit, the usual things. We got very little sleep because Alex wanted to leave before sunrise. By early morning, we were already driving toward a remote area he knew about. I do not want to say exactly where it was, not because I think anyone reading this would actually go looking for it, but because there are some places people should leave alone. The trip itself started out better than I expected. We parked near a wide area of open plains surrounded by forest and set up camp. The weather was cold but clear. For most of the day, we walked around, drank beer, talked about old memories, and tried to shoot ducks flying overhead. I missed almost everything. Rory was not much better. Alex made fun of us constantly. Jamie somehow managed to hit more targets than any of us, even though he acted like he barely cared. It was probably the best time I had spent with those guys in years. For several hours, it felt like nothing had changed. We were younger again. No jobs, no responsibilities, no problems. Just four friends doing something stupid together. By evening, the temperature dropped quickly. We returned to camp and started preparing dinner. The sky had turned dark blue, and the last light was disappearing behind the distant trees. Rory started cooking pork chops over the fire. Jamie sat nearby with his branding iron resting over the flames. I remember asking him why he had brought it. He shrugged. Why not? That was Jamie. Alex, meanwhile, was getting restless. He kept staring toward the forest. "We should check that out," he said. I looked over. "Check what out?" "The woods. We've been outside all day." "Not that part." He pointed toward a darker section of forest beyond the plains. I already knew what he was talking about. Earlier, we had noticed an old metal gate near the tree line. A large sign was attached to it. Restricted access. We had joked about it during the afternoon. At the time, none of us had seriously suggested going through. Now, Alex stood up. "Come on." Rory looked at him from beside the fire. "I'm cooking." Jamie lifted the branding iron and inspected the tip. "I'm staying here." Alex looked at me. I sighed. "Seriously?" "Just for a few minutes." I should have said no. That is probably the clearest mistake I remember making. Not crossing the gate. Not following Alex. Simply not listening to the part of me that already knew this was a bad idea. But Alex smiled. That stupid, convincing smile. A few minutes later, we were walking toward the restricted area. The gate was taller than I remembered. A chain-link fence extended in both directions, disappearing into the trees. The sign looked old but official. Restricted access. No entry. Alex studied it. Probably government land. "Exactly," he laughed. So we shouldn't go in." He pulled a machete from his pack. I stared at him. "Are you serious?" He did not answer. He started cutting through part of the fence. It took longer than he expected. But eventually, he made an opening large enough for us to squeeze through. "After you," he said. I should have walked back to camp. Instead, I followed him. The forest became thick almost immediately. The ground was uneven and covered with dead leaves. Tree branches tangled overhead, blocking most of the remaining light. Within a few minutes, I could barely see the open plains behind us. Alex used a flashlight. I used the light on my phone. We moved deeper into the woods. Nothing seemed unusual at first, just trees. Bushes, darkness, then Alex stopped. I almost walked into him. "What?" He pointed ahead. There was a light in the distance. Green, not the weak green of a glow stick, not the soft color of a camping lantern. This was bright, almost neon. It glowed between the trees like something from a science fiction movie. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. Alex did not answer. We moved closer. The light seemed to be coming from somewhere beyond a thick wall of rose bushes and small trees. We could not see the actual source, only the glow. It covered the nearby branches in a strange green color. Everything around it looked wrong, artificial, too bright, too clean. We stood there staring. It probably lasted only a minute or two. but in my memory it feels much longer. Neither of us said anything. Then something moved behind the bushes. Branches shifted. Leaves rustled. Alex raised his flashlight. A woman stepped through the roses. At first, I thought my brain had misunderstood what I was seeing, because she looked completely normal. That was somehow the strangest part. Imagine being deep inside a restricted forest at night. There is a bright green light shining from somewhere you cannot see. You are far from any road, far from any house. And suddenly, a normal-looking woman steps out of a wall of thorn-covered bushes. She had long brown hair, green eyes, a blue sweater, jeans, no jacket, no backpack, no flashlight. There were no cuts on her face, no scratches on her clothing, nothing to suggest she had just walked through rose bushes. She stopped several feet away from us and smiled. I do not mean a friendly smile. It looked fixed, perfect, like the expression on a mannequin. Alex took one step backward. "Who are you?" he shouted. The woman kept smiling. "What are you doing here?" No answer. She stared directly at us. I remember feeling as though she was not looking at our faces. She was looking through us. Alex raised his voice. "Are you lost?" The woman's smile slowly widened. Then she spoke. "Could stars do best to take us part? Or should we make suns brighter with our soul?" I stared at her. I honestly thought she was having some kind of medical emergency. A stroke. A seizure. Something neurological. Her words sounded like English, but they did not make sense together. Before I could say anything, she moved. Fast, she stepped toward Alex and grabbed his arm. "Shine, for us." Alex screamed, not from pain, from pure panic. He shoved her away. Then he turned and ran. I did not think. I followed. We crashed through the forest in the direction we had come from. Branches hit my face. I nearly fell twice. Behind us, I could hear movement. I never looked back. The green light disappeared between the trees. We reached the hole in the fence. Alex squeezed through first. I followed. Then we sprinted across the plains toward camp. By the time we reached the fire, both of us were breathing hard. Rory looked up from his plate. What happened? Jamie was still sitting by the fire. The branding iron was buried in the flames. Its tip was glowing. "There was a woman," I said. Rory blinked. "A woman? In the forest. What woman?" "I don't know. She was acting strange. I think she was having a stroke or something." Alex dropped into a chair. He was breathing heavily. Jamie frowned. "So why did you run away?" It was a fair question. I looked at Alex. I did not have a good answer. "Alex panicked," I said. "He ran, so I followed him. I started pacing. We should call an ambulance when we get service. Or the police. Someone." Rory was not listening anymore. He was staring at Alex. "Mate?" I stopped. Rory slowly stood. "Alex, are you all right?" I turned around. Alex was shaking. Violently, his whole body trembled as if he were standing naked in freezing weather. "Alex?" He opened his mouth. A dry, raspy sound came out. Nothing else. I moved closer. "What's wrong?" Then I heard something snap. A small sound, like a branch breaking. Alex jerked. His left arm bent strangely. Another snap. His right shoulder shifted. Rory stepped backward. "What the fuck?" More cracking sounds came from Alex's body. His legs twisted. His spine arched. His head snapped to one side. I stood frozen. His blonde hair started to grow. I know how insane that sounds, but I watched it happen. It lengthened in seconds. The color darkened. His face changed. Not gradually, not naturally. It moved as though something beneath the skin were reshaping him from the inside. His jaw narrowed. His cheekbones changed. His body became smaller. His clothes shifted strangely around him. The blue in his eyes disappeared. Green replaced it. Then the cracking stopped. Alex was gone. The woman from the forest stood in front of us. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same smile. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then she lunged at me. I reacted without thinking. My hand grabbed the nearest object, Jamie's branding iron. The metal end was still red from the fire. I swung it forward. It hit her face. The sound is something I will never forget. A loud, sizzling noise, like meat dropped into a hot pan. She screamed. It was not a normal human scream. It was too high and too deep at the same time. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. She pulled away. I turned the iron and hit her again with the cooler end. The metal struck the side of her head. She collapsed. I dropped the iron. Get in the van. Nobody argued. Rory ran first. Jamie was right behind him. I grabbed the keys from my pocket. Thank God I had driven us there. If the keys had been in Alex's pocket, I do not know what would have happened. We threw ourselves into the van. I started the engine. Rory kept looking through the rear window. Go. Go. I hit the accelerator. The tires threw dirt behind us. We left everything. Tents, food, guns, equipment, clothes, none of it mattered. I looked once in the mirror. The campfire was shrinking behind us. For a moment, I thought I saw something standing beside it. But I did not slow down. We drove for hours. Nobody spoke. Eventually, we reached a road with phone service. We could have called the police. We could have reported Alex missing. We could have told someone what happened. None of us did. What would we say? Our friend turned into a woman? A strange woman copied his body after touching him? She came from behind a glowing green light in a restricted forest? No sane person would believe us. And if someone did believe us, I was not sure that would be better. We eventually separated. Rory went home. Jamie went home. I went home. That was 2 weeks ago. I have not spoken to either of them since. Not once. I do not know whether they are alive. I do not know whether they saw anything after we separated. I was too afraid to call. Last week I was still staying in my apartment. I had spent days trying to convince myself that what happened had some rational explanation. Drugs, mass panic. A shared hallucination. Anything. One afternoon I opened my window. My apartment was several floors above the street. I looked down. There was a bus stop across the road. Several people were waiting, and she was there, the woman. She was wearing different clothes. A dark coat, black trousers. Her hair looked exactly the same. At first, I tried to convince myself it was someone else. Then she turned her face slightly. I saw the scar. A burned mark around one eye, the exact shape of Jamie's branding iron. My stomach dropped. She was standing completely still. Everyone around her looked normal. One man was checking his phone. A woman was carrying shopping bags. Someone else was talking to a child. None of them seemed to notice anything strange. The woman simply stared ahead. I do not think she saw me. I closed the window. I packed my belongings that same day. My parents had an old house outside the city. They have not lived there in years. The property has a basement, one entrance, one door. I drove there. I carried canned food downstairs, bottled water, tools, blankets, anything I might need. Then I blocked the basement door. There is a well on the property, so I have water. I have enough food for a while. I do not know how long I can stay here. Weeks, maybe months. I am not planning to leave unless I absolutely have to. I keep thinking about Alex. More specifically, I keep thinking about the moment the woman touched him. She grabbed his arm. That was all. Maybe that is how it works. Maybe touching someone allows her to become them. Maybe Alex died when she touched him. Or maybe something worse happened. Maybe he is still alive somewhere. Maybe she copied him while leaving the real Alex trapped inside whatever she is. I do not know. I also keep thinking about the green light. What was behind those rose bushes? Was it some machine? A doorway? A vehicle? A place? Was she alone? That question scares me more than anything else. Because if she was not alone, then how many others are there? Maybe they do not all look like her. Maybe the woman we saw was already copied from someone else. Maybe she was never really a woman at all. Think about it. You could walk past one of them every day and never know. Maybe one of them becomes the new cashier at your local supermarket. Maybe one moves into the apartment across from yours. Maybe your friend introduces you to a new girlfriend you have never met before. Maybe your neighbor suddenly starts acting slightly different. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic, just different. Maybe they smile too long. Maybe they stare without blinking. Maybe they say something strange that almost sounds meaningful. Maybe they touch your shoulder while passing behind you. Maybe they shake your hand. Maybe they hug you. And then what? Do you change immediately? Does it take hours? Was Alex already changing while we were running back to camp? Maybe that was why he barely spoke. Maybe the person running beside me was already not fully Alex anymore. I have replayed that entire night in my mind hundreds of times. The restricted gate, the green light, the bushes, the woman, her smile. Those words. Could stars do best to take us part? Or should we make suns brighter with our soul? I still do not understand them. Maybe they mean something. Maybe they do not. Maybe she was trying to imitate human speech. Maybe whatever she is does not fully understand us. That would explain the way she stared, the way she smiled, the way the words sounded almost correct but not quite. I do not know. I only know one thing. If you ever meet someone like her, do not worry about being polite. Do not worry about embarrassing yourself. Do not worry about looking crazy. If a stranger approaches you and something feels deeply wrong, trust that feeling, especially if they stare at you with bright green eyes, especially if their smile does not move naturally, especially if they start saying things that sound like broken poetry. Do not let them come close. Do not let them shake your hand. Do not let them touch your arm. Do not let them touch your shoulder. Get away. If you have to push them back, do it. If you need to defend yourself long enough to escape, do it. Then run. Do not stay because you think they need help. Do not follow them. And if you ever see a strange green light coming from somewhere you know you are not supposed to be, leave it alone. Whatever curiosity tells you, ignore it. Alex followed curiosity. I followed Alex. Now he is gone. And something wearing the face of that woman followed me home. I do not know how she found me. I do not know if she knows where I am now. Sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds above the basement. The house is old. Wood shifts. Pipes make noises. Animals move outside. That is what I tell myself. But every time something creaks upstairs, I stop breathing. I sit in the dark and listen, waiting because I keep imagining the same thing. Footsteps crossing the floor, slowly moving toward the basement door. Then, silence. And finally, a knock. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe I will stay hidden here until I finally convince myself that I am safe. But I do not think I will ever truly believe that. Because the woman was standing at a bus stop less than 2 weeks after we left her unconscious beside that campfire. She was hundreds of miles away from the forest. She was wearing different clothes. She looked like she belonged there. If I had not seen the scar around her eye, I would never have recognized her. Nobody else at that bus stop seemed afraid. Nobody noticed anything. That is the part that keeps me awake. She did not look lost anymore. She looked like she had learned how to fit in. So I am posting this as a warning. Maybe one day you will see someone you have never seen before walking down your street. Maybe she will be standing outside your building. Maybe she will open the door of your partner's house. Maybe she will be introduced as the new employee at work. Maybe she will sit beside you on a bus. She might look completely normal. She might smile. She might reach out and touch your hand. She might say something strange, something almost human. Do not wait to understand it. Do not let her touch you. At first, everyone complained about the flies. They were everywhere. They filled kitchens and cafes, crawled over fruit displays in supermarkets, and gathered inside bus shelters where the glass trapped the summer heat. People complained online. Shop owners hung sticky traps from ceilings. Supermarkets sold out of insect spray within 2 days. The small supermarket near my flat even put handwritten signs above the empty shelves saying customers were limited to 2 cans each. There was nothing left to limit. On the first night, I found 3 flies in my bedroom. One circled the light bulb, while the other 2 kept throwing themselves against the window. Their bodies made tiny tapping sounds against the glass. I killed all 3 before going to sleep. When I woke the next morning, there were 6 more. Nobody understood where they were coming from. The news blamed the unusually hot weather. Some reports mentioned rubbish collections being delayed because of strikes and staff shortages. Overflowing bins were supposedly creating perfect breeding conditions. That explanation made sense outside. It did not explain why people were finding flies inside clean apartments on the 20th floor of buildings. It did not explain the offices, or hospitals, or schools. People started uploading videos. One man filmed dozens of flies gathered around the plug sockets in his living room. Another showed them crawling over a smoke alarm. A woman recorded them squeezing through the narrow gaps around the extractor fan in her bathroom. For about a week, it was all anyone talked about. Then, strangely, people stopped complaining. I noticed the change at work. I worked in a small shop where we sold coffee, snacks, newspapers, and the usual convenience store stuff. One afternoon, my coworker Amelia was talking to a customer when a fly landed on the edge of her coffee cup. I watched it walk slowly around the rim. It rubbed its front legs together. Amelia noticed it. I saw her eyes move toward it. Then she continued talking. I expected her to wave it away. She did not. She picked up the cup and drank. The fly remained on the rim. As Amelia tilted the cup toward her mouth, it moved close enough that its body was almost beneath her nose. Its wings trembled in the steam coming from the coffee. She swallowed, put the cup back down, smiled at the customer, never reacted to the fly at all. After the customer left, I pointed toward her cup. "You've got a fly on there." Amelia looked down. "Oh," that was all she said. Then she slowly placed one finger beside the rim. The fly stepped onto it. Immediately, I do not know why, but that disturbed me much more than seeing her drink while it sat on the cup. Flies do not behave like that. They panic when you move toward them. They take off suddenly. They crash into windows for 10 minutes rather than use the open gap beside them. They do not calmly climb onto your finger. Amelia lifted her hand. The fly remained there. She brought it close to her face. Its wings fluttered against her cheek. "Be careful," she whispered. For a second, I thought she was talking to me. Then she walked toward the front door. She stepped outside and gently released the fly. When she came back, I was still staring at her. "What?" she asked. "You drank your coffee while it was sitting on the cup." She shrugged. It was only resting. That phrase started appearing everywhere after that. Only resting. Someone would see a fly on their food and say it was only resting. Someone would have one crawling across their arm, only resting. A mother might discover one in her baby's hair, only resting. I once saw a man with a fresh cut on his hand calmly watch a fly walk across the exposed skin. Someone beside him noticed my reaction and smiled. "Don't worry, it's only resting." A week earlier, Amelia had chased a fly around our stockroom with a rolled-up magazine until she almost knocked over an entire display. Now she treated them like frightened pets. I asked if she had stopped using insect spray. Her expression changed, only slightly. The corners of her mouth tightened as though I had said something cruel. "The flies aren't hurting anyone," she said. "They spread disease." She looked genuinely confused. "Do they?" I laughed because I thought she was joking. She did not laugh. During the following days, I noticed more people behaving the same way. At a cafe near work, a fly crawled over the plastic lid of a man's coffee cup while he drank through the opening. When it reached his mouth, he simply stopped drinking. He waited. The fly moved aside. Then he continued. Videos appeared online. People would hold out their hands and wait for flies to land on them. Parents encouraged children to let them crawl across their fingers. There was one video I still think about. A woman sat completely still while dozens of flies covered her face. They crawled across her cheeks, her forehead, her eyelids. Some disappeared into her hair. She never moved. The video received almost 2 million likes. I watched it twice, not because I enjoyed it, because I was trying to understand why almost nobody in the comments seemed disgusted. People called it beautiful. Some said she was lucky. Others said she had been chosen. Chosen, I assumed it was some stupid internet phrase. One of those trends people repeat for a week before forgetting completely. Then my roommate used the same word. Her name was Samira. I came home from work one evening and found her sitting at the kitchen table. Her hands were folded carefully in her lap. All the windows were closed despite the heat. The kitchen felt suffocating. Sweat had darkened the collar of Samira's shirt. The room smelled of overripe bananas and rubbish that had been sitting too long. A fly was sitting between her eyebrows. It was bigger than the ones I had seen outside. Its body was a deep black. I could see short hairs covering its back. "Why are the windows closed?" I asked. Samira remained completely still. I didn't want it to leave. I dropped my bag. "What?" She smiled. It chose me. The fly started moving. It crawled slowly down the bridge of her nose, then stopped beside one nostril. I watched it lower its head. "Get that thing off your face." Samira rolled her eyes. "Stop being dramatic." The fly moved closer to her nostril. One of its legs lifted each time she breathed. I grabbed a tea towel from the counter. "Seriously, Samira," she barely had time to react before I flicked the towel toward her face. The fly shot toward the ceiling. Samira screamed. She stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. "You could have killed it." I stared at her. That was the idea. She looked at me as if I had just admitted to hurting someone's pet. The fly circled above us. The buzzing filled the kitchen. Every time it passed beneath the light, its shadow moved across Samira's face. "It's mine," she said. There was something in her voice that made me stop arguing. I left the flat for several hours instead. That night, I woke to buzzing beside my ear. I slapped the side of my head and sat up. For several seconds, I could not see anything. My curtains were closed, but orange streetlight leaked around the edges. The buzzing stopped. I switched on the bedside lamp. A fly was sitting on the wall only a few inches from my pillow. The skin beside my ear prickled where it had been. I rubbed the spot hard with my palm. Then I grabbed the book from my bedside table. The fly did not move. That was strange. Usually, they took off the moment you raised something toward them. This one stayed still. I hit it. There was a soft crack. When I pulled the book away, one wing remained stuck to the wall. The rest of the insect slid slowly downward in a dark smear. I cleaned it with a tissue, dropped everything into the bathroom bin, went back to bed. The next morning, Samira was standing in my bedroom doorway. She was holding the crumpled tissue. A black leg had pushed through the paper. "What did you do?" Her voice sounded genuinely devastated. It was in my room, her eyes filled with tears. I wish I were exaggerating. Actual tears. She turned around without another word and carried the tissue into the kitchen. I followed. She unfolded it carefully on the table. The fly was flattened. Its abdomen had split open. A thin yellow liquid had soaked into the tissue. Samira reached out, touched one of its legs with the tip of her finger. "I'm sorry," she whispered. My stomach tightened. Then she added, "I'm sorry she did that. She, not it." She, living with Samira, became almost impossible after that. She stopped taking the rubbish outside because flies gathered around the bins. If I tried to remove anything, she became upset. Fruit sat on the kitchen counter until it turned brown and collapsed into itself. Juice leaked into bowls. The smell became sweet and rotten. Tiny white larvae eventually appeared around the edge of the sink. I found Samira standing over them one morning. I grabbed cleaning spray. She blocked me. "Don't. They're maggots. They're not ready." I lowered the bottle. "Ready for what?" Samira stared at the writhing white mass. "I don't know." That answer frightened me more than anything she could have said. Flies started following Samira around the apartment. Not swarms. That would almost have been easier to understand. Usually, it was just one. Always one. It would sit on her shoulder while she cooked, rest in her hair while she watched television, crawl across her hand while she used her phone. Then, I started noticing the pattern outside, too. One fly per person. The bus driver had one resting near his collar. A woman on the train had one crawling across her handbag. I saw a child in a pushchair with a fly nestled beneath his chin. His mother watched it with a soft smile. Nobody swatted them anymore. Nobody looked annoyed. They were not random. I became certain of that. Each fly stayed near one particular person. It did not move between strangers. It did not circle rooms looking for food. It stayed close. Sometimes people spoke to them. Amelia had one at work. It sat beside the card machine while she served customers. Sometimes it lifted its wings. She had started bringing small pieces of food for it. She placed them in a bottle cap behind the counter. One afternoon, I looked at it and said, "You know flies only live a few weeks, right?" Amelia stared at me. Then at the fly. "That isn't true." "It is." She smiled. "Not these." I stopped eating lunch in the staff room. The flies were everywhere in there. They walked across forks, across plates, across people's hands. I once saw one resting directly on a man's lower lip while he chewed. Nobody cared. By the end of that week, calves had removed the mesh covers from pastry displays. The bakery across the street from work took theirs away after customers complained that they made the flies feel unwelcome. Feel unwelcome. That was the actual complaint. After that, I watched flies crawl across iced buns while customers waited in line. They squeezed between the layers of croissants, walked over sandwiches. Nobody reacted. The television reports changed, too. Stories about infestations disappeared. Pest control advertisements stopped appearing. One scientist who had warned people about contamination returned to television and apologized. He said his earlier concerns had been based on outdated information. Local councils began asking residents not to use chemical insect sprays. Then a video appeared online showing a man setting fire to a cluster of flies gathered on a rubbish bin. People attacked him, not the flies, the man. Several people dragged him to the pavement. Others knelt beside the burned insects. They cried. Their crying was louder than the man's shouting. That was when I started carrying a small can of deodorant and a lighter in my bag. I had no plan. I did not intend to use them. I just wanted something. Anything by then, the flies had stopped approaching me. At first, I thought I was lucky. I no longer woke to buzzing. Nothing landed on me outside. My bathroom mirror stayed clear while every other room seemed full of insects. Even in crowded places, there was always an empty space around me. Then people noticed. Amelia was the first. I was restocking shelves when she came over. "Where's yours?" I pretended not to hear. She stepped closer. Her eyes searched the shelves around me. Then the ceiling. The lights. "Where is it?" "I don't have one." The fly resting on her chest stopped moving. Completely still. Amelia looked at me. "You killed it, didn't you?" The shop had been noisy only seconds earlier. Suddenly, everything felt quiet. Customers were listening. A man near the entrance turned his head toward me. A fly sat at the corner of his eye. Its legs disappeared between his eyelashes. Amelia reached for my wrist. I pulled away. Her expression was not angry. That would have been better. She looked sorry for me. "You shouldn't have done that." I left work early. When I got home, Samira was in her bedroom. Her door was open. The curtains were closed. The room was dark despite the afternoon sun. She was lying on top of the covers. I almost called her name immediately. Then I saw the flies. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. They covered her from the chest upward. Her hair seemed to move because so many insects were crawling through it. Lines of them crossed her cheeks. They gathered around her lips, her nose, her eyes. I stood in the doorway. "Samira?" Her eyes opened. Flies were sitting on her eyelids. One became trapped between them when she blinked. For a second it disappeared. Then it crawled out. "You're home," she said. Her voice sounded thick. I stepped into the room. The flies reacted. Their wings began vibrating. The sound was low. Heavy, I could feel it inside my teeth. "We need to go to the hospital. I'm not ill. There are flies in your mouth." Samira smiled. 3 of them crawled out from between her teeth. I stumbled backward, covered my own mouth. Samira slowly sat up. The insects moved with her. They clung to her clothes. Several disappeared beneath her collar. I could see the fabric moving as they crawled underneath. "You frightened yours away," she said. I stared at her. "No," she tilted her head. "You know I killed it." Every fly in the room stopped. The buzzing ended instantly. The silence felt impossible. Samira's smile vanished. "You shouldn't have said that in front of them." She reached toward me. I ran. I slammed my bedroom door, locked it, then dragged my chest of drawers across the floor and pushed it against the door. Samira did not follow. For nearly an hour, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no talking, no movement. Then the buzzing began. At first, it was near the window, a faint sound. Then it spread, behind the bed, under the floor, inside the walls, thousands of wings. I pressed my hands over my ears. Something tapped against the vent above my bed. I looked up. A fly had pushed its head through one of the holes. Another appeared beside it. Then another. Their bodies pressed against the tiny openings. Black legs reached through. Feeling the air. Searching, I opened my bag, found the deodorant, found the lighter. Before I could do anything, Samira spoke through the door. "They only want to help." The handle moved. The drawers shook. "Go away. You're making them anxious." Her voice was calm, almost gentle. The buzzing became louder. The first fly squeezed through the vent. It dropped onto my bed, then flew upward. Another came through, then another. I raised the deodorant and sprayed. Several flies fell onto the duvet. They twitched. Outside my room, Samira screamed. The sound did not stay human. It cracked halfway through, changed into something wet and choking. Then, something hit the bedroom door hard enough to move the drawers several inches. I did not wait. I opened the window, climbed onto the fire escape. The metal was so hot that I could feel it burning through my socks. I climbed downward as fast as I could. Above me, flies poured out of my window. Hundreds, maybe thousands. For some reason, they did not chase me. They gathered around the frame. Watching, that is how it felt. Watching, then Samira appeared behind them. Her face was almost completely black with flies. Her mouth was packed with them. So many had crawled between her lips that her cheeks were stretched outward. Her jaw hung open. More insects crawled from her nostrils. She raised one hand. For a second, I thought she was waving goodbye. Then I realized she was pointing. Down, I looked toward the pavement. People had stopped walking. Every person below was staring up at me. Every single one had a fly. I reached the ground and ran. Nobody followed me. Nobody tried to grab me. That somehow made it worse. As I passed people, their heads turned. The flies resting on them sometimes lifted into the air, hovered, then landed again. I ran to the nearest train station. It was crowded. The heat inside was terrible. Sweat and hot air clung to the tiled walls. I pushed through the barriers, boarded the first train that arrived. The carriage was packed. I stood beside the doors trying to catch my breath. Then I noticed everyone was looking at me. There was a fly on every passenger. One sat on a woman's forehead. Another rested on the bald patch of the man beside her. A teenage girl had one sitting on the hand holding her phone. Nobody spoke. The doors closed. The train entered the tunnel. The windows became black mirrors. Then the flies started moving. The first rose from the shoulder of a man near me. Another lifted from a woman's hair. Then another, one by one. Not all together. Slowly, deliberately, the buzzing filled the carriage. More flies took off. Dozens circled beneath the lights. Their shadows moved across the passengers' faces. Nobody ducked. Nobody waved them away. Every passenger continued staring at me. The flies gathered above my head. I crouched, covered my face. The first landed on my arm. Then another. Their feet were lighter than I expected. Tiny points touched my skin. They moved over every hair, every pore. More landed on my neck, my hands, my clothes. Several crawled beneath my shirt. Their wings buzzed beside my ears. One disappeared into my hair. I felt it pressing against my scalp. "Help me, nobody moved." I screamed again. "Please." The woman closest to me leaned forward. Her eyes were wet, not with fear, with sympathy. "Stay still," she said softly. I stared at her. "You killed the first one." A fly landed on my lower lip. I clamped my mouth shut. More gathered beside it. Their legs moved quickly across my skin, searching along the seam between my lips. The woman smiled sadly. "So it takes more now." I shook my head violently. Several flies lifted away. More replaced them immediately. People watched from every seat. Some looked relieved. Others smiled. The train continued deeper into the tunnel. There was nowhere to go. The doors were locked. The windows were sealed. The buzzing became so loud that I could barely hear myself screaming. Flies covered my cheeks, my forehead, my eyelids. I kept my mouth shut as tightly as possible. Then, one reached my nose. Its legs touched the edge of my nostril. I tried to brush it away. Someone caught my wrist. I do not know who. Another person grabbed my other arm. "Stay still," someone whispered. The fly pushed forward. I felt its body enter my nostril. Its wings brushed against the skin beneath my nose. I screamed through my closed mouth. The passengers around me sighed, not in horror, in relief. A long, peaceful sound moved through the carriage, as if something terrible had finally been corrected, as if I had been sick, and they were watching the cure begin. The fly crawled deeper, and everyone smiled. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survived things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.